think Stephen A. was expecting this response.
You're identified as a 24-year-old conservative online influencer. Why is the word conservative in there?
Well, I'm not the one who read that. That was you who read that.
A lot of people like to dismiss Shirley as some partisan hack, but when Stephen A. tried making the same argument, Nick immediately turned the question back on him, exposing the entire narrative. And today, we're breaking it all down. So if you enjoy content that cuts through the noise, hit that subscribe button and let's jump right into it.
Supporters say you expose real corruption, but critics say your reporting fuels suspicion toward immigrant communities. Do you worry there's a line between exposing fraud and creating fear?
No, I think fraud's all of our dollars. I mean, when you pay taxes, it's just as much as a Republican dollar as a Democrat dollar. And I think these politicians need to stop using immigrant communities to commit fraud.
And that's what you think this is about. They're using migrants and immigrants to commit fraud. That's what you believe this is all about?
Yeah. In a lot of these cases, Minnesota, they use the Somalians. In California, they use the Armenians, and they let that happen for years upon years.
If you think about the talking point Stephen A. was parroting here, calling it absurd would be an understatement. We've reached a point in our political discourse where people spend more time questioning the motives of someone exposing massive fraud than focusing on the fact that taxpayer dollars were stolen in the first place. It's a classic distraction tactic. And apparently, it's working because the conversation around Shirley shifted to why he went to Minneapolis instead of the fraud itself. CNN wasn't even subtle when covering Nick's Minnesota video, referring to him as a MAGA journalist. That was the second talking point Stephen A. repeated, but Nick's response completely turned that narrative on its head.
My question to you would be, you're identified as a 24-year-old conservative online influencer. You didn't mind that introduction at all. Why is the word conservative in there? Why can't you just be an online influencer? Favoring one side over the other, and the vice president, who happens to be a conservative, the vice president of the United States, is speaking up for you, it would give the impression that you're partisan in what you're doing. What do you say to people who would have that suspicion?
Well, I'm not the one who read that. That was you who read that. If you would have asked me to give an introduction, I would have said independent journalist Nick Shirley. I wouldn't have said conservative. Okay. That has nothing to do with it. Like I look at what I'm doing right now is a public service for everyone in America. Mm-hmm. And it is interesting how by doing this, people have labeled me as a conservative, which I am a conservative, but that's not what my journalism is. Imagine if you were like, oh, he's a left-leaning sports talk show host.
Right. I agree. I mean, I read because I thought that's what I actually thought that's how you requested to be interviewed. So I'm glad I asked the question for clarification. I didn't know.
Oh, he definitely did. But he's trying to smile it off, hoping the viewers wouldn't notice. Another point is that JD leads the White House task force to eliminate fraud. So it's not surprising he'd praise Nick, whose work focuses on exactly that. In fact, Nick has arguably done more than most mainstream outlets to shine a light on this issue. Even if you set him aside for a moment, the Government Accountability Office has repeatedly confirmed that fraud costs taxpayers a ton of money. In their most recent report, they claimed since fiscal year 2003, cumulative improper payment estimates by executive branch agencies have totaled $3 trillion. Though the actual amount might be much higher, just last week, Nick appeared before the Senate to talk about this problem, and they made sure to properly introduce him this time. But before we play that, we have a quick word from today's sponsor. Modern defense is only as strong as its supply chain, and almost every fighter jet, tank, missile, or advanced weapons system depends on tungsten. Yet we haven't mined it commercially in nearly a decade. Washington has responded with billions of dollars for domestic critical minerals, including the $12 billion Project Vault stockpile plan in support of American production. This is where Vault Strategic Mining comes in. Trading as KNOX in Canada and KNXFF in the US, Vault focuses on historic American mines, applying modern exploration techniques to bring proven assets back to life. Its flagship project in Nevada operated under a defense minerals exploration contract during World War II. Tungsten prices also remain near record levels as governments look for a secure supply outside of China. Vault's flagship sits inside the Great Basin, a productive, historic tungsten region, placing the company directly where demand and policy are beginning to align. If you want to learn more about them, check out the link in the description. A special thanks to Vault Strategic Mining for making today's video possible.
Our first witness will be Nick Shirley. He is an independent journalist known for his on-the-ground investigations, which he publishes on his social media pages and the Anti-Fraud Club website.
When we talk about fraud, we are talking about money that is being stolen from hardworking, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. This issue has nothing to do with political parties. No dollar says Republican or Democrat on it. When a fraudster commits fraud, he or she steals from all of us. People often wonder how come this fraud became so big and how come it becomes so rampant? And the reason is because no one actually ever really looked into it. When Elon Musk offered to help by creating Doge, people burned his factories, bombed his cars, and politicians even celebrated his company's stock going down. Elon was right when he said the fraudsters complained the loudest. By exposing the fraud, I actually also exposed the politicians and media who worked for years to cover it up. Governor Tim Walz labeled my work as white supremacy and called me a far-right delusional conspiracy theorist. Meanwhile, he dropped out of re-election, and he even said he has ended his political career. Now, the highest government-funded daycare in Minnesota has pleaded guilty to daycare fraud, and the largest autism bust in American history has been exposed. Where is Tim Walz in the media now?
They're too busy trying to paint Nick as some MAGA journalist. In some cases, like with Newsom and California Democrats, they even passed a law banning investigative journalists and watchdogs from posting the personal information or image of any designated immigration support services provider on the internet, if it's intended to cause harm. Ironically, a few days after the bill passed, Newsom's administration announced that it had uncovered a major hospice fraud scheme in LA, something Shirley had already made a video about earlier. Obviously, we're not CNN, and we're not going to criticize the move just because Newsom took action, but at least give the guy who originally exposed it some credit. Going back to Stephen A's interview, Nick revealed where his investigations could head next, with Texas and Florida potentially on his radar.
As I sit here and think about what you're saying, one, I noticed Minnesota, I noticed California. Are there any red states, Republican states that you've investigated?
Yeah, I've looked into some of these states. When I do these videos, it takes a while for me to do. So I do, for instance, want to go to Texas and expose some of the H-1B visa fraud that takes place there. You have a lot of these people who are coming over on these fake H-1B visas, and they're taking jobs from Americans. I know there's a lot of fraud here in Florida as well. I also think it's the responsibility of these states to also go after this fraud.
So you're not of the mindset it's not a conservative or Democrat thing or liberal thing with you. It's crime, it's lawlessness versus lawfulness. That's what it is for you.
100%. In Minnesota and California just happen to have the most amount of fraud. That's why I went there. And those are the same states that are actively suing the government for investigating the fraud too.
It's almost like Democrats can't comprehend that fraud is fraud, and we shouldn't approach it with a partisan angle. If we look out the White House task force, JD said that they've worked to recover as much as $160 billion in fraudulent small business loans, pandemic relief, and student aid, among other government handouts. The DOJ also announced it launched a new division focused on prosecuting fraud. So don't be surprised if we start seeing a lot more headlines in the coming weeks and months. From what we know so far, the effort appears to be well organized and focused on actually getting results, which is exactly what should be happening. We're trillions of dollars in debt. And if we want to keep important government programs around, stopping taxpayer money from being stolen has to be a part of this conversation.